All right, and we are live. Namaste, hello, and welcome everybody to What's Your Story? This is your host, Dr. Varun Gandhi. Love and abundance, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I like to start out always with love and abundance, a little peaceful greeting and chant for the day. Today we have a guest whose name is Ashwani Jain, and he says, if elected, I'm going to say when elected. When elected, he is going to be the youngest governor and the first person of color for the state of Maryland. Thank you so much, Ashwani, for being here. You know, politics is something that, as Indians, we're in America, we're still getting into it. I've interviewed a couple of politicians on the West Coast. This is my first interview with someone in the East Coast, and so I'm extremely excited to have you here, extremely excited to hear your story, how you got interested, what brought you into politics, what brought you into this race. So before we get started on the first question, I want everyone that's tuning in to please like the video, please hit the subscribe button. The more you like it, the more people will join in, the more people would tune in to listen to Ashwani Jain, who is running for governor. So Ashwani, let's get started.
Let's do it.
What's your story? How did you get started in politics, and how did you get started in this race?
Absolutely. So first of all, I just want to say thanks again for the opportunity. I think for me, getting involved in politics really happened by accident, but it started with this idea of inclusion and accessibility. And it started back when I was 13 years old. I was diagnosed with cancer. It was obviously very scary. During that time, I saw a world in which I may not get to leave the four walls of that hospital room. You know, I saw kids sitting right next to me lose their battles. I felt depressed and alone. And I also found many who were making decisions for me as opposed to making them with me. And so it was in that moment I thought, okay, if I'm blessed enough to get a second chance at life, I was going to try to make it count. And luckily, I not only beat cancer, but was really able to go from survivor to advocate. And ironically, by getting involved in politics, I actually found opportunities to, connect with other people who had similar struggles, to find ways to channel my pain into something positive. And then also really make sure that I'm having opportunities, or I'm creating opportunities for people who are going through something similar to actually have a say in the decisions made about their lives. And that advocacy work now has really led me to run for Maryland governor, because I not only understand how to create policy, but I also have the perspective and empathy to enforce policies in an equitable manner.
I think that's such an important point, like to have that empathy, right? Because a lot of politicians, they can make the decisions, they can do all of that, but then they lack let me be compassionate in how I go about doing things. And that's a unique experience that you have of having cancer and going through that whole experience. So how did that kind of build up? Like you've been through certain experiences. So how did that help you become more empathetic and become more compassionate to people, to everyone?
I mean, at the end of the day, it allows me to put myself in the shoes of my potential constituents, right? Some of the common concerns that I've heard from residents all over my state and actually all over the nation is that politicians, A, they don't focus on long-term solutions. B, they make it difficult to hold them accountable. And C, they don't include residents in the decision-making processes, right? And so the reason I'm running this type of inclusive and accessible campaign that's actually 100% volunteer run and empowers people as young as middle schoolers all the way to those that are retired to actually be senior advisors and actually help get a seat at my table. I think it's all stemming from that idea of how do you actually not only focus on creating, really inclusive policies that are detailed focus, but do it in a way where you're actually putting yourself in the shoes of the people who are going to be impacted by those decisions.
Right. So have you had a lot of, when you're making your policies, have you spoken to a lot of people? Do you hold like these sessions where you speak to them and they share their concerns, what they're looking for in the next governor? How do you go about doing that?
All the above. Yeah. So like I said, I'm actually the first statewide campaign in the nation to have my campaign be entirely volunteer run. And so it's pretty much crowdsourcing every idea. So either I have a policy idea that then I'll reach out to my team of folks, again, all ages, all parts of my state, and just ask them, hey, what do you think about this? Can you help me with some of the research? And also let's have a conversation to say, hey, how would this actually impact you, either good or bad? And let's kind of go through those details. The other way is if anyone on my team or anyone in my state has a policy idea that I have not yet proposed, I always create that door of opportunity for them so they can come to me at any point in time, bring up that recommendation, and then from there, either help me with the research of it, or at least then I can go back to the rest of my team, say, hey, this is a new idea that came up. Now let's figure out how to make this possible. And so it is a very collaborative environment. And I believe the way in which you run a campaign is probably going to dictate how you're going to lead if elected. And so I'm not waiting until I'm elected to do all these kinds of programs and this type of inclusivity, because I do think it's important to lead by example.
Oh yeah, definitely. People have role models for a particular reason. They follow their movement, they watch how they're doing, and if their actions don't follow along with the words, then you can see there's some kind of mismatch there. So I'm glad you're kind of doing that and following along with your words as well. Let's talk about policies. What are your top 3 policies that you really, really care about and you're hoping to push through?
Yeah, I'm gonna give a little bit of a different answer. I'm gonna say 2 top priorities.
Sure.
Number 1 is, again, this idea of how do we include more people in the process? Because I think regardless of any specific details to any policies, if you're not including residents in that process, you're not going to actually have sustainable long-term change. And so really looking at how do we break down those barriers of entry. And then the second thing, among the 60 plus policies that I've proposed on my website, jainforgovernor.com, one of them is called the Maryland Now Plan. And the Maryland Now Plan hopes to do 5 things. Number 1, it's hoping to eliminate our state income tax for 95% of Maryland workers. Number 2, it's going to make Maryland the very first state in the country to guarantee free public transit for every resident. Number 3, it's going to create the nation's very first guaranteed jobs program for anyone who's struggling to find work. Number 4, it hopes to legalize marijuana and actually expunge the records of those who have been wrongfully imprisoned. And then number 5, it's going to impose specific anti-corruption measures to really get money out of our politics.
I love how you're getting money out of politics, because that's such an important aspect of it. How would you do that? How would you go about getting money out of politics?
Yeah, a few ways. So number 1, in terms of my campaign, and again, showing, leading by example, all of the events I host on my campaign are completely free of charge and accessible to every single person. Right? A lot of times campaigns host fundraisers. You have to have a certain amount of money in terms of getting to an event or speaking to a candidate. I removed all those barriers. Another thing is in terms of policy, making sure that if you are a governor, lieutenant governor, or anyone who runs my agencies, if elected, if you have a business, it has to be sold off before you enter office. While you're in office, you cannot own or trade stocks. And then after office, I'm going to impose a 4-year lobbying ban.
Okay. Wow. So those are really great tactics. And I've seen, like, for example, Nancy Pelosi, she's made a whole lot of money through this pandemic by being a politician and knowing things ahead of time. So I think that really does a great job of keeping money out of politics. Have people been interested in participating in your campaign as being leaders with you, alongside you, by removing all of these, their own personal interests and agendas out of it? Have you seen that, or has it been a struggle for you to get people?
I thought it was going to be a struggle when I launched back in January, but to be honest, I've been overwhelmed with the support and really humbled by it. Every candidate, every campaign, they always talk about this idea of how do you excite and expand the base? But because the way in which I'm running my campaign and these kinds of policies that I proposed, as an underdog candidate with relatively little name recognition in my state, as the youngest in not only my race, but again, youngest would be elected in the nation, I actually have 3 times more active volunteers than any other campaign in my state. We have over 320 volunteers from every single county in my state, from all age groups, all demographics, and again, a lot of low dollar donors. And so that is the best indication that our message is actually getting through. But we have a little less than a year until the primary, so it's never ending work.
You mentioned volunteers. I want to talk about it. You put out a video just recently about saying that you started off with, I think, 3 volunteers, and now you have more than 300 volunteers. How did you get from that one stage where you only had 3 volunteers all the way up to 300?
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work, right? I mean, it is number one, being as transparent and specific in the policies you're proposing, right? I think a lot of times candidates, politicians, they, use a talking point of an idea, but then they fail to detail exactly how they're going to pay for it. What are they going to do in the short term and the long term? From day one of my campaign on my website, anyone can go there and see 60 detailed policy proposals and how I fund all of them. So I think people can appreciate that, and that naturally builds a lot more credibility when I'm reaching out and talking to people. Second thing is actually me going out and about. In this case, it's all virtual, but really reaching out to every single county, every organization, nonprofit, schools, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, and making the time to actually have a one-on-one conversation, which again, I have found a lot of candidates, especially for higher office, they only meet one-on-one with people if they have a lot of money or if they're, some powerful person in a group. I'm meeting with everyone from the top down to the bottom and vice versa. And then the third thing is, and I think this is really important, is providing people an opportunity to get involved if they want to. A lot of times I have seen, and again, I've been involved in politics for almost 20 years. I have seen candidates talk the game of, yeah, we want younger people, diverse people to get involved. They'll ask their volunteers to dedicate hundreds of hours to get them elected, but then they shy away if those volunteers actually want to help dictate strategy or policies. On my case, I'm actually giving them a platform that, hey, if you join my team, there's no time commitment. If you want to help dictate policies, if you want to help dictate strategies, you can actually be part of that conversation. And I don't care if you're too young or you're too old. Everyone is going to be treated with respect and actually create this inclusive environment. My dog agrees. But I think in doing that process, that's why, I believe I have found the success that I have so far.
Yeah, no, that's really very important to have that kind of transparency with your constituency, with your volunteers, and also allowing them to take the lead and setting some policies and, keeping that door open, especially because you've seen a lot of toxic environments where you're only allowed a certain, access to certain things. You can't do, you're very limited in what you can do in your mobility. So I really like that about your campaign, that it's completely one volunteer run, and it's also open for a lot of outside opportunities.
Yeah.
And there's a comment that says dictate or suggest, people dictating as opposed to suggesting. So that's a really great comment. And Magnolia, I want to bring up the comment that they had is, what was your decision-making process to run for office?
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, it was, what are the issues that are happening around me that I'm frustrated by or that I don't see enough progress being done? And that's true for anyone. If you ever think about running for office, don't do it for yourself, right? Try to actually address an issue. And for me, I've seen in my state, a lot of the things that I've been fighting for in my previous work, in my current work, working at a healthcare nonprofit, for example, enough action was just not being done. And so then I said, okay, that's step one. I know that there are issues. Step two is, do I actually have solutions to those issues? So I did my research. I figured out, I proposed some things, at least in my head. And I said, okay, yeah, I do have solutions. Then the third thing is anyone currently addressing those solutions? I didn't see enough of them being addressed. Then number four is, okay, instead of just advocating for these policies, maybe let me help create those policies by running for office. Step five is then figuring out, okay, what are the positions that are available in my state? Governor, county council, state senate, what are the positions that are available, and how can I make the biggest impact and get the most people involved in the process? And when I looked at all those steps, for me, that decision was governor, because I think it is the best position to really reform our politics, get a lot of these issues resolved, and get more people in the process. And then it happened to be, on top of all of that, that our current governor is term limited. So there also was a vacant position. So all of those things kind of fell into place.
Wow, that's beautiful how it all aligned together. What was those first few issues that got you interested in running?
I mean, I think number one, Maryland actually has the highest incarceration rate in the nation of Black men ages 18 to 24. So that was really sad. It's really depressing. And there's so many easy solutions to that. But I think that was one of the biggest issues that stood out. The fact that in Maryland, we still allow fracking and the operation of coal-fired power plants. the fact that we still treat opioid addiction as a crime instead of a disease, the fact that we're not doing enough to fund our public education systems, and the fact that we're not doing enough to, again, include more people in the process. And there's always a disconnect with what the establishment says in terms of inclusivity and how they're actually acting. I think all of those were issues that I've been fighting for and working on in different capacities. I know those are going to be impacting every resident of my state. And I just wanted to do something about it.
Talking about that first issue with the incarceration, that is you're taking on a big industry.
Yeah.
How would you go about doing that? Because I feel like there'll be a lot of roadblocks along the way.
I would say in the same way that I'm taking on the establishment, just running, right? A lot of those in the establishment who I've known very well, they were telling me, hey, you're too ambitious, sit down, you don't have enough experience, you're too young to make a difference, don't run for this position, and kind of telling me what my value is and what I'm worth and what I can and cannot do. So the mere fact that I know my value, I know that majority of the residents of my state are supporting the policies that I'm proposing and the type of inclusivity and accessibility that I'm advocating for, I think that dictates all the policies that I'm pushing forward. As it relates to criminal justice reform, I actually have an entire criminal justice platform on my website, again, jainforgovernor.com, where I detail everything specific about how do you actually tackle these issues in specific ways. So as an example, right, I talk about everything from ending extreme sentences for children. I talk about ending the money bail system. I talk about making sure that, if you're seeking help, if you have opioid or drug abuse, we're not going to arrest you, but instead we're going to get you help. I talk about investing more in mental health professionals. I talk about preparing those in prison for life outside of prison. I talk about legalizing marijuana and expunging the records of those who've been wrongfully imprisoned, eliminating our school resource officer program, which essentially puts police officers in our public schools, and also limiting the influence of ICE for nonviolent offenders. So again, that's a long way of saying I'm looking at these issues in a comprehensive way, but I'm also detailing the specifics of how exactly I plan to accomplish these. And when you detail out those specifics, I think it makes it a lot easier for people to get on board and to actually make those changes.
Right. Yeah. Keeping that transparency. And then I think that's what the youth are looking for, is like, how open are they to involvement, to our involvement, right?
Exactly.
I think that's a really great way to go about doing things. What would you say is, like, if someone is looking to run for any kind of office all around the country, what are the certain strengths or skills that they're kind of required to have, or they should have to launch a successful campaign?
I would say, first of all, understand your value and don't let anybody tell you what you can and cannot do. I have faced this as a brown person, as a young person, as someone who's been through physical and mental health issues. And I faced this obviously running for office. And I think everyone in some ways can face these kinds of challenges where you feel like you're not confident enough in yourself because of what society tells you you can and cannot do. And I think a lot of times for people who want to run for office, especially, people of color, we're looking at this process as really complicated, not transparent, and it's scary. It's intimidating.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that, right? There's a reason why certain people have made it difficult for people like us to get involved. And so what I'm trying to do is kind of make it more transparent, make it easier, and open up doors of opportunity. But it has to start with an individual understanding their own value, knowing that they can make a difference if they do the work. And then, like I said before, right, understanding what are the issues that are happening around your community. Do you have actually specific solutions to address those issues? And then finally, building the right team around you. Once you have those kinds of things set up, make sure you surround yourself with supportive people. People are going to be your ride or dies, right? Have your back. But then also people who are going to check you and not just be the yes men and women, but actually tell you, hey, you know what? You're wilding out a little bit here. Or you're acting a little crazy here. Or this policy doesn't really make as much sense. Or, hey, this is a good start, but have you thought about X, Y, and Z? And so if you surround yourself with a core group of those people, I feel like you kind of become invincible, right? Then no matter what the haters say or what some of the, some of the barriers to entry happen, you're kind of able to push through that and maneuver it in at least a little bit more of a successful way.
Right. So once you made that decision, like, hey, I am running for governor, or I'm running for whatever particular office, what are the next few steps to get started?
I mean, you have the logistical stuff of it, which is, to file with your state board of elections. Every state kind of has different requirements. Sometimes you need to have certain signatures. You need to, have some sort of filing fees. It changes based on the state you're living in.
Okay.
But essentially, you go to your state board of elections, you figure out what their process is, and you fill out the paperwork. You open up your campaign bank account. You find your campaign treasurer and kind of the main team members you're going to have. Everything from the website to social media, and kind of looking at how do you create this startup and make it a reality. That's essentially what you do logistically. And then otherwise, it's just getting out there then, right? It's rolling up your sleeves, finding out every individual group person that you can meet with and having those conversations. And not just saying, hey, I'm only going to meet with you because I want your vote or I want your money, but starting with, hey, I'm not asking anything of you other than what are the issues from your perspective? I want to listen and learn. Then when you come from that place, it takes time, but when you're dedicating that conversation, then you can turn around and say, oh, great, I actually have some solutions. Here you go. Or you want to work with me on some of these solutions.
Right.
And then it's just repeating that every single day, just nonstop, always figuring out ways to get the word out and always figuring out ways to get more people to know who you are, have those conversations, and then get a platform in your operation.
Okay, so getting the word out. What other than, so you said meeting organizations, meeting as many individuals as you can. Right now, is it all virtual, or do you have in person?
Yeah, so I launched my campaign in January, and I committed to being 100% virtual until the fall. Other candidates have already started doing things in person. I just wanted to play it extra safe and also set a better example because, we're still in a pandemic. We still have this Delta variant. And so I committed to being 100% virtual, at least until next month. And then after that, we're going to see what happens. But the idea is if things, at least in my state, continue to be safe, then I'll do, half in person and half virtual.
Okay.
Yeah.
So someone that's just starting off and they're just thinking about maybe that there's a potential for them to run for something, but they're kind of also in their mind, they have that, the self-talk of maybe the self-defeating self-talk, like, I don't want to do this. So what can you tell them to get over that, move past that self-talk and actually go and take action?
Best thing I can say is you are going to be impacted by these policies no matter what. So if you're going to be impacted by these policies, might as well get involved. And if you believe in your own value, even if you have those doubts, we all have doubts. I don't care who you are, but even the president has doubts, right, in their own value. And so I think putting myself and having everything in perspective that, hey, I'm not the only one who's afraid, right? Everyone kind of fakes it until they make it. Everyone, even all my mentors and people that I've looked up to, they have told me, they even get nervous whenever they're going in for interviews. So that is, I think, a commonality that no matter who you are, you can kind of feel better about that. Hey, you're not the only one. Right. And then again, being able to understand that if you're not getting involved or if you are getting involved, those policies are going to impact you. And so try to take a little bit more of a leadership role or a little bit more ownership of how you want to see things get done, especially if you're not liking the way things are being done right now.
Yeah. I think that's very important. Like, if you're not liking things, then take the action. We have another question from the audience is, what is the cutting edge reform as a millennial that you have up your sleeve?
I guess, are you referring to policy wise or maybe if you can elaborate on the question, I'd love to answer it.
Yeah, I think it's policy wise as a millennial. Like, what do you have what do you offer for the millennials, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, right. I think number one, it's creating a door of opportunity, right? If elected, like I mentioned before, I would be the first millennial governor in our nation's history, youngest current governor in the nation. And so just showing people that, hey, just because you're young doesn't demean or diminish your value. And so I think that's the first biggest thing that I'm hoping to accomplish, just opening up those doors of opportunity for all millennials, all young people across this nation that, hey, this can be done. And then the second thing, all the policies that I've mentioned, even my Maryland Now plan, it's going to affect millennials and young people, right? When you eliminate the state income tax and give more younger people disposable income to pay down other debts, to start a business, to find work, to buy a home, when you're guaranteeing them a job if they're struggling to find work, whenever they get to and from and they're not able to access public transit, making sure that's free and accessible to them. Making sure that we're working on climate change issues. We're working on making education more affordable and more accessible. We're working on affordable housing and affordable healthcare. I think these are all things that not only impact every resident, but also impacts millennials who are just starting to, get on their feet, or at least continue to kind of live their own American dream.
Yeah. By the way, I wanted to take a moment to say all the Daisies out there, he's eliminating state income tax. So definitely watch out for him. I know you like more money in your pocket, so definitely watch out for him. I think he's doing big things out there. Homelessness is a big issue. I know in LA we have a lot of homeless folks living out in Skid Row. Do you have a plan that would kind of help out with the homelessness situation?
Absolutely. So in terms of the perspective that I would bring, right, one of the jobs I had working in the Obama White House was actually a deputy White House liaison to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So actually getting to work directly with the housing secretary to make sure we have affordable housing nationwide and also in my state. And so some of the specific proposals that I have as running for governor, again, all on my website, janeforgovernor.com, but some specifics, right? Number one is increasing the availability of housing. And you can do that by increasing zoning capacities, having more mixed use development, right? Having housing built closer to transit, having more high rises and townhouses, not just single family zoning, more walkable communities. Second thing is increasing the affordability of housing. Making sure we're lowering interest rates for renters who make payments on time, making sure we're prohibiting discrimination based on source of income. And also in my state, we have something called the MPDU program, moderately priced dwelling units, which essentially require that any new building, any existing apartments have a certain percentage of affordable housing. And in my state, that ranges based anywhere from 10 to 20% based on where you live. And so I'm going to mandate a minimum of 15% of every dwelling unit has to be affordable. And then also things like right to counsel, right? Protecting renters who face evictions. And then finally, like I said earlier, having people have more disposable income in their pockets obviously helps when you're, trying to make the bills and kind of reduce some of those mortgages.
Yeah. So we talked about doubt earlier. What were some of the doubts that you had when you were first running?
All of them, just like the same doubts I've had, in any job I've had. And I think this is something where politicians, candidates, or influencers, however you want to name it, we always share the good stuff that we're going on in our lives. We don't ever share those insecurities, and we all have insecurities. Yeah. And again, that's where I really try to make an effort to show, hey, I'm a real person. I go through the same kind of struggles and anxieties that anybody else does, and I'm okay to talk about it because I have enough confidence in my value and in myself. But yeah, I was super nervous. Like, are people going to actually get on board? Are people going to see and resonate with what I'm talking about in my message? Am I too young to make a difference? Am I not smart enough? Am I not good enough? I'm running against an entire system that has, forced oppression on people of color, on younger people, and people from different marginalized communities. That's scary. And it's not easy to do. So will I be able to kind of stand up to it? And, I've learned in my life, and this goes back to when I was fighting cancer, when I was a kid, you have to just take one day at a time, do things for the right intention and the right reasons, build a good team around you, and just try your best because you never know. And nobody knows. And, not to get too therapy, but I have learned that that's the best way, not only to deal with campaigns and politics, but to deal with life. And fortunately, I have seen once I do those things, success is always right around the corner and doors of opportunity actually open up. I never thought I would, as a volunteer in high school, working for this guy named Barack Obama's campaign, I never thought working on a guy's campaign like that would lead me into working in the White House for the first African-American president. Growing up as a son of immigrants, my family never thought that politics or public service was something that an Indian kid could get into and actually make a difference. But all these things are happening, and I credit it to, yes, hard work, but also a lot of good luck, a lot of internal, talk, and just taking things one day at a time and not taking no for an answer.
Were there any resources, any books, any organizations, any people, mentors that helped you out along the way?
Everything. I am a learner of everybody, even people I disagree with. But specifically, tangibly, I would say, there are groups like Run for Something. It's a national organization that really helps first-time candidates get into the process, learn how to fundraise, learn how to put your operation together. They endorse, they train. There are a lot of organizations like that. You just Google it. You'll find national organizations that put together these kinds of trainings and these kind of resources. But even in your state, there are a lot of organizations, I'm sure, that do something similar. So, for me, because I've been involved in politics for so many years, some of these things came naturally to me because I've been practicing and learning throughout the years. But then also, relying on my former bosses, mentors that I've had, colleagues that I've had, and then obviously my friends and family. So it's kind of all the above, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's having that support structure that to fall back on anytime you need someone, anytime you're going through some issues, challenges. Then I think that's really, really beneficial. Yeah. So we do have a kind of a clarification on that earlier question. They said that as a governor, you set a tone, a policy that reverberates to all, young and old. Yeah. And that's what they were looking for, the cutting edge reform as a millennial.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, I addressed some of those, especially with my Maryland Now plan, which would do a lot of historic things in Maryland, right? Making Maryland the first state to guarantee free public transit, making Maryland the very first state to guarantee jobs for anyone who's struggling to find work, making Maryland, I think, the 10th state in the nation to eliminate the state income tax, legalizing marijuana, expunging the records of those who have been wrongfully imprisoned, imposing anti-corruption measures, which applies to every single individual, especially young people who want to see themselves reflected in office, but also want to feel like, this big money is not just running their government, but they are.
Right. Yeah, put the power back to the people.
Exactly.
I think that's an important task to take on. Because I think so far, big money is all throughout politics and corrupted it, and lobbyists, and it's everywhere. So taking that out is important. How can people reach you? JainForGovernor.com. If you go to my website, I have details in terms of my background, professionally and personally. I have over 60 detailed policy proposals. So anyone can just sit down and look through those and actually understand what am I talking about and why I'm hoping to accomplish these things. And then there's also a volunteer tab in there, a donate tab. We're asking for anywhere from $5 to $10 donations. And then in terms of volunteering, like I said, I want to make sure that not only can you volunteer for my campaign, but if you want to help with strategy, help make policies, or just have a seat at the table, and whether you live in Maryland or not, if you just want to see a type of candidate like myself get elected, I want to make sure that you're included in that process. So everything is on JainForGovernor.com. All right, JainForGovernor.com. I just put that on the screen as well. So make sure you go check him out. Make sure you check out his policies. I did, look through all of his, the snapshot of his policies. He's got 60 of them. The Maryland Now plan is on the website as well. All of these are important tools that you'll be looking at in order to make a decision. Even though Ashwani just turned 32 last week, by the way, happy birthday. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. Even though he's going to be the youngest governor of Maryland, he is still walking tall, standing strong, and making sure he gets the word out, and people everywhere, especially in Maryland, but all over, hear of him and hear about him because he's doing big things in Maryland. So being the youngest, you may not have a lot of, especially from an older population, because I was part of this organization, the Gujarati Society of Southern California, where they had older folks on board as the leadership. And they kept saying, hey, I want to bring on youth. I want to, building this organization for the youth. Right. But when it actually came time to doing it, it wasn't there. Right. Yeah. What can you tell people that are looking to, maybe they're undecided, maybe they're looking to vote for someone? How can you share, even though you have 32 years of experience, or maybe 20 years of experience in politics, right?
Yeah.
Even though you have a lot of experience in politics, but you may still be viewed as that young
Right.
candidate who does not know things. So what
Yeah.
can you tell people to push them in your favor?
Yeah, for any of those folks, I'm honest and upfront. I say, yes, I am young, but I've also lived a life that's far beyond my years. I've beaten cancer. I've worked in the public sector, private sector, and nonprofit sectors. I've worked directly for a president, a vice president, and 2 federal agencies, all before I was 31. I know how to create policy, and I have the necessary perspective and empathy to enforce policies in an equitable way. And I know that's what majority of people want in not only their leaders, but especially in Maryland, in their governor.
Right. Now that's a very critical, that's a key point to have. Inclusivity is very important because you're doing this for the people and you want to include the people in your campaign.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I love how you're bringing people together as opposed to, sectioning them off. That's an important quality to bring to the table. I think that's all the questions that I have. Ashwani, this has been a very important, very fruitful interview. I got to learn a lot from you. I got to learn a lot about you. I hope our listeners also have this opportunity to learn more about Ashwani. Definitely go to janeforgovernor.com. Again, please like this video, hit the subscribe button, make sure that other people share it with people because this is an important conversation to have. The goal of this show, What's Your Story, is to include Indians, South Asians that are doing big things, that are not the typical attorney, engineer, lawyer, doctor, but are doing something outside of this. We have artists, we have politicians on our show, and I do want to spread the message. I want to include more Indians, more South Asians in areas that we're not currently doing, and motivate people to go into these areas. So that's why the show is created. I'm so grateful to have Ashwani here to spread the message and to get people more comfortable with following politics, following their urge to being a leader and making a difference for not only them, but not only their family, but also a whole group of people, right? I think that's a very important quality to have. So thank you, Ashwani, for joining in. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Love and abundance. I hope you all have a fantastic day. I hope you learn from Ashwani and definitely reach out to him at janeforgovernor.com. Thank you so much. Have a great day.